keep telling everybody they should move on. We will. Whatever it takes.
Whatever it takes.
Avengers, Endgame, a comprehensive film analysis and explanations. Avengers, Endgame is a 2019 American superhero film based on the Marvel Comics team The Avengers. Produced by Marvel Studios and distributed by Walt Disney Studios Motion Pictures, it is the direct sequel to Avengers, Infinity War, 2018, and the 22nd film in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, MCU. The following paragraphs provide complete analyses and explanations of the entire film. This comprehensive film analysis begins with the production context and cultural status of the 2019 superhero film based on the Marvel Comics team The Avengers. Produced by Marvel Studios and distributed by Walt Disney Studios Motion Pictures, it is the direct sequel to the 2018 film and the 22nd picture in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, MCU. The following paragraphs provide complete analyses and explanations of the entire film. This motion picture was directed by Anthony and Joe Russo, with a screenplay by Christopher Marcus and Stephen McFeely. The film serves as the grand finale of the Infinity Saga, a storyline that spanned 11 years and 21 previous films. Its production budget was approximately $356 million, making it one of the most expensive films ever made. This feature became the highest-grossing film of all time upon its release, earning $2.798 billion worldwide before eventually being dethroned by Avatar. The film holds a 94% approval rating on Rotten Tomatoes, with the critical consensus calling it exciting, entertaining, and emotionally impactful. This analysis now turns to the opening of the film, which begins immediately after the events of the previous installment, showing the devastating consequences of Thanos' snap, known as the decimation. We see Clint Barton, also known as Hawkeye, lose his entire family as they turn to dust around him. This scene establishes the film's central emotional theme, grief. The narrative then cuts to Tony Stark drifting through space on the Benatar, almost dead, with Nebula as his only companion. He records a final message for Pepper Potts, believing he will not survive. This moment highlights Tony's vulnerability and his growth from a selfish playboy to a selfless hero. The surviving Avengers on Earth include Captain America, Black Widow, Thor, Hulk, War Machine, Rocket Raccoon, and later Captain Marvel. They track Thanos to the Garden, a peaceful planet where he has destroyed the Infinity Stones to prevent anyone from reversing his work. A shocking moment of rage and despair occurs when Thor, enraged that there is no way to undo the snap, decapitates Thanos. This act demonstrates that victory without reversal feels hollow. The audience realizes that killing Thanos brings no satisfaction because the dead remain dead. A time jump of 5 years later shows a world still grieving, stuck in a state of collective post-traumatic stress disorder. Cities are quieter, homes are emptier, and survivors have aged but not healed. This time jump is a bold narrative choice that prioritizes emotional realism over conventional pacing. Scott Lang, also known as Ant-Man, emerges from the quantum realm having experienced only 5 hours while 5 years passed outside. He theorizes that the quantum realm allows for time travel because time works differently there. This scientific premise becomes the engine for the film's second act. Tony Stark initially refuses to help with time travel, having built a peaceful life with his wife Pepper Potts and his daughter Morgan. He fears losing what he has gained. However, he cannot ignore a problem he might solve, and his ego, now tempered by love, drives him to perfect the technology. Bruce Banner, now permanently merged as Professor Hulk, combines his intelligence with the Hulk's physical strength. He represents the acceptance of one's dual nature. He is the one strong enough to wield the Infinity Gauntlet later, proving that brains and brawn can coexist peacefully. Thor, the god of thunder, has become an overweight, alcoholic recluse living in a shack in New Asgard. The film treats his trauma not as a joke, but as a debilitating illness. His arc is about realizing that being worthy does not require being perfect or physically fit. Clint Barton, having lost his family, becomes a vigilante known as Ronin, killing criminals across the world. He represents the rage of loss, which contrasts sharply with Black Widow's determination to build a family through the Avengers. His grief is violent and externalized. Steve Rogers, Captain America, runs a support group for survivors of the snap. He tries to teach people to move on, while secretly being unable to move on from his lost love, Peggy Carter. This contradiction makes him a deeply empathetic leader rather than a flawless icon. The team splits into groups to retrieve the Infinity Stones from specific points in the past, a sequence often called the time heist. They travel to 2012 New York, 2013 Asgard, 2014 Morag and Vormir, and 1970 New Jersey. Each location serves a specific character purpose. In 2012 New York, Tony Stark, Captain America, Ant-Man, and Hulk retrieve the space, mind, and time stones. However, Loki escapes with the Tesseract, creating an alternate timeline. This moment sets up the Disney Plus series about Loki, but also shows that time travel has consequences. In 2013 Asgard, Thor and Rocket retrieve the Reality Stone from Jane Foster. Thor gets closure with his mother, Frigga, who knows she will die soon. She tells him, "Everyone fails at who they're supposed to be. The measure of a person is who they are." This advice saves him. In 2014 Morag, Nebula and War Machine retrieve the Power Stone before Peter Quill can find it. Meanwhile, Black Widow and Hawkeye travel to Vormir to retrieve the Soul Stone. This mission requires a sacrifice, a soul for a soul. The narrative builds toward this devastating moment. On Vormir, the Red Skull explains that to obtain the Soul Stone, one must lose that which they love. Black Widow and Hawkeye fight each other to be the one who dies. Natasha ultimately kills herself by falling from the cliff, saving Hawkeye and the universe. Her death is logical and tragic. Black Widow, who spent her life trying to erase the red in her ledger, views herself as having nothing to lose. She sacrifices herself to give Hawkeye back his family. The film implies that the unloved orphan is the one who truly understands the value of love, making her death the most poignant. In 1970 New Jersey, Tony Stark and Captain America go further back to get Pym particles and an alternate tesseract. Tony encounters his father, Howard Stark, and shares a moment of quiet gratitude. Steve sees Peggy Carter through a window, longing for a life he never had. Upon returning to the present, Bruce Banner wears the Infinity Gauntlet and snaps his fingers. He undoes the decimation, bringing back everyone who was dusted. However, the energy from the stones damages his arm severely. This act of restoration is the film's turning point toward victory. The 2014 version of Thanos discovers the Avengers' plan through the nebula from that timeline. She betrays the team, allowing Thanos to bring his entire warship to the present day, 2023. This twist raises the stakes because this Thanos has not yet experienced any defeat or doubt. Thanos' 2014 army attacks the Avengers' compound, destroying it completely. The surviving original Avengers stand against him alone, believing they have failed again. This moment of despair sets up the film's most celebrated sequence, the return of all the fallen heroes. Doctor Strange opens a portal, and from it emerges the restored Black Panther, Shuri Okoye, the Guardians of the Galaxy, Spider-Man, the Wasp, and countless others. Captain America, standing alone against Thanos' army, hears Sam Wilson say, "On your left." This portal's scene is widely regarded as one of the greatest cinematic moments in the superhero genre. Captain America finally proves worthy to lift Mjolnir, Thor's hammer. He wields it against Thanos, delivering a beating that surprises even Thor. This moment fulfills a hint from an earlier film and shows that Steve Rogers has always been worthy, even when he pretended otherwise. The final battle is a sprawling, chaotic, and glorious confrontation between every living hero and Thanos' forces. Every character gets a moment to shine, from Spider-Man using instant kill mode to Wanda Maximoff nearly killing Thanos alone. The film pays off years of character investment. Thanos, overwhelmed, calls for his warship to rain fire on the battlefield, endangering his own troops. He then seizes the Infinity Gauntlet, believing he has won. However, Tony Stark looks at Doctor Strange, who raises one finger, the one winning timeline out of 14 million. Tony Stark charges at Thanos, and the stones transfer to his own nanotech suit. He speaks the words, "I am Iron Man," and snaps his fingers. Thanos and his entire army turn to dust. Tony has saved the universe, but the energy from the stones fatally wounds him. Tony's death scene is the emotional climax of the entire Infinity Saga. Pepper Potts tells him, "You can rest now." He dies surrounded by his friends, having gone from a selfish weapons dealer to the greatest hero in the universe. His arc concludes with the ultimate sacrifice. The funeral sequence shows every character from the MCU paying respects to Tony Stark. His daughter Morgan asks for a cheeseburger, referencing his first film. The camera pans over hundreds of heroes, confirming that Tony's legacy will live on through everyone he saved. Thor, having learned that worthiness is not about physical perfection, appoints Valkyrie as the new king of New Asgard. He joins the Guardians of the Galaxy, choosing to find himself among misfits rather than ruling alone. This ending rejects traditional heroic expectations. Captain America returns the Infinity Stones to their original timelines to prevent alternate realities from collapsing. However, he chooses not to return to the present. Instead, he stays in 1949 to live the life he was denied with Peggy Carter. He finally gets his dance. Old Steve Rogers appears on a bench nearby, having lived a full, quiet life. He passes his shield to Sam Wilson, not Bucky Barnes. This choice solidifies legacy over identity, arguing that heroism is about character, not serum or longevity. Sam accepts the burden and honor. Bruce Banner confirms that Steve's choice did not break the timeline, but created a new branch where Steve lived happily. This explanation attempts to resolve the time travel paradox, though some critics argue it contradicts the film's own rules. The narrative prioritizes emotional satisfaction over strict logic. Nebula, who began as a villain in earlier films, ends as a hero who helped save the universe. She kills her 2014 self, symbolically destroying her past trauma. Her arc from abused daughter to independent hero is one of the most understated transformations in the MCU. The film famously has no post-credits scene. Instead, it features the sound of a hammer on an anvil, a nod to the first Iron Man film. Then the audio signatures of the original 6 cast members play. Robert Downey Jr., Chris Evans, Scarlett Johansson, Mark Ruffalo, Chris Hemsworth, and Jeremy Renner. The first hour of the film is deliberately slow, showing grief and its weight. Some viewers found this pacing meandering compared to the relentless pace of the previous film. However, this slow burn allows the emotional payoffs of the third act to land with tremendous force. Critics noted that Carol Danvers, Captain Marvel, is conspicuously absent for most of the plot. She saves Tony, destroys a warship, and fights Thanos, but is largely sidelined so that the original 6 Avengers can finish the fight. This choice frustrated some fans who wanted her to have a larger role. The time travel logic explicitly mocks Back to the Future, establishing that changing the past creates new timelines rather than altering the future. However, Captain America returning to live with Peggy contradicts this logic, as he would have existed in a closed loop or a different reality. Thor's depression arc received praise for its honest portrayal of mental illness. The film never mocks his weight as a joke, but shows him struggling to feel worthy. His mother's advice that failure is part of being human gives him permission to keep living despite his mistakes. Black Widow's lack of a funeral or significant mourning scene drew criticism from fans. Unlike Tony's elaborate funeral, Natasha's death is acknowledged briefly. The directors later explained that the surviving Avengers were too devastated to hold a ceremony, but this explanation did not satisfy all viewers. The Avengers Assemble moment, when Captain America finally says the phrase that had been teased for years, brought audiences to their feet. Chris Evans delivers the line with quiet authority, and the charge that follows is pure catharsis. This moment alone justifies the film's 3-hour runtime. Professor Hulk's characterization divides fans. Some appreciate seeing a happy, integrated Bruce Banner. Others miss the rage and conflict that defined the character in earlier films. Regardless, his role as the one who reverses the snap gives him a heroic purpose beyond smashing. The film prioritizes character over spectacle, with quiet scenes providing the emotional weight. Thor and Frigga, Tony and his daughter Morgan, and Clint and Natasha's final conversation on Vormir are all intimate moments that ground the cosmic action in human feeling. The destruction of the original Avengers compound symbolizes the end of an era. The building where the team assembled, trained, and lived together is reduced to rubble. This physical destruction mirrors the dissolution of the original team as members retire, die, or leave. The final battle includes every major hero from the preceding 21 films. From the Ravagers to the Wakandan army to the masters of the mystic arts, the film assembles a universe. This inclusion rewards long-term viewers who followed every franchise entry. Thanos in this film is a younger, more ruthless version than the one killed in the first act. He has not yet been softened by his victory or his retirement. He is purely ideological, believing that his genocide will bring gratitude. This makes him a more straightforward villain, but less complex. The female heroes assemble in a single shot during the final battle. Captain Marvel, Scarlet Witch, Valkyrie, Shuri, Okoye, Gamora, Nebula, the Wasp, and Mantis stand together to protect Spider-Man. This moment, while criticized as performative, was celebrated by many young female viewers. The film's soundtrack by Alan Silvestri reuses themes from earlier MCU films, including the original Avengers theme. When Captain America stands alone against Thanos' army, the music swells with a slowed, heroic version of the theme. The score is integral to the emotional experience. The 5 years later title card was a risky narrative choice. Most blockbusters would have reversed the snap within the first hour. By showing a world that has learned to live with loss, the film argues that grief changes people permanently and that moving forward is possible but painful. Tony Stark's cabin in the woods represents his dream of domestic peace. He has a daughter, a loving wife, and a quiet life. His decision to leave this peace to save others shows how much he has grown. The cabin also becomes the site of his holographic funeral message. Morgan Stark, Tony's daughter, delivers the line, "I love you 3000, which becomes the film's emotional catchphrase. This number comes from a conversation where Morgan told Tony she loved him more than 3000. The phrase appears on Tony's funeral wreath, symbolizing paternal love as his ultimate motivation. The Ancient One, appearing in the 2012 sequence, explains that removing an Infinity Stone creates a dark timeline. Bruce Banner convinces her to lend the Time Stone by promising to return it. This scene establishes rules for time travel that the film later breaks with Captain America's ending. Howard Stark's conversation with his son, whom he does not recognize, is heartbreaking. Tony, who never had a good relationship with his father, finally tells Howard that he was grateful for everything. This moment gives Tony emotional closure before his physical death. Peggy Carter appears only briefly, but her presence drives Captain America's entire arc. Steve spent decades frozen, missing their date. By choosing to stay in the past, he finally prioritizes his own happiness over duty. This choice redefines heroism as knowing when to stop fighting. The film's box office success proved that serialized storytelling could achieve mainstream dominance previously reserved for franchises like Star Wars or Avatar. It destroyed records for opening weekend, second weekend, and total gross, becoming a genuine cultural phenomenon. Unlike most franchises that reset the status quo, this film delivered permanent death for Tony Stark and Natasha Romanoff. It also provided definitive closure for Steve Rogers' retirement. This commitment to finality set a new standard for ending a franchise cycle without soft reboots. The "I am Iron Man" line, first spoken in 2008 as an arrogant ad-lib, becomes a solemn statement of duty. Tony says it quietly, almost reverently, before snapping. The callback demonstrates how the MCU used 11 years of storytelling to transform a boast into a sacrifice. The film succeeded because it understood that for a superhero story to be satisfying, the heroes must grow, change, and eventually pay the ultimate price for victory. It is a film about endings, and it refuses to look away from the cost of winning. The directors, the Russo brothers, have stated that they viewed this film as a finale for the original 6 Avengers. All subsequent MCU projects, including Spider-Man, Far From Home, and the Disney Plus series, are epilogues or new beginnings. This clarity of purpose gives the film its weight. The film's legacy includes its influence on how blockbusters handle grief. Prior to this film, superhero movies rarely showed the long-term psychological consequences of trauma. After this film, projects like WandaVision and The Falcon and the Winter Soldier explored similar themes in depth. The On Your Left callback to Captain America. The Winter Soldier is a masterful piece of fan service. It rewards viewers who remember Sam Wilson running laps around the National Mall. More importantly, it signals that help has arrived from the very first friend Steve made in the modern era. Spider-Man's reunion with Tony is brief but devastating. Peter tells Tony that he felt himself dying after the snap. Tony, who has been carrying guilt over Peter's death for 5 years, can barely speak. Their embrace is the final emotional beat before Tony's sacrifice. Gamora from 2014 survives the final battle, but does not return to the present with the Guardians. She is a version who never fell in love with Peter Quill. This unresolved thread sets up future films, but within this movie, it adds bittersweet complexity to the happy ending. The film's 3-hour runtime was a risk, but the Russo brothers argued that every minute was necessary. The slow first act, the complex second act, and the massive third act each serve a distinct emotional purpose. Few critics argued that the film should have been shorter. The visual effects required to de-age actors like Robert Downey Jr. and Chris Evans are seamless. The 2012 sequences and 1970 sequences use digital de-aging to make the actors look like their younger selves. This technology allowed the film to revisit earlier moments without recasting. The film's release strategy included a global marketing campaign that hid major plot points. Trailers showed only footage from the first 20 minutes. No advertisements revealed the time heist, Tony's death, or Captain America's ending. This secrecy preserved the theatrical experience. In summary, this complete analysis and explanation of the entire film demonstrates that it succeeded because it prioritized emotional closure over franchise continuation. It honored 11 years of storytelling by allowing its original heroes to die, retire, and change permanently. The film remains a landmark in cinematic history. The opening sequence showing Clint Barton's family turning to dust uses no dialogue for nearly 2 minutes, allowing the audience to sit in pure visual horror as a child's baseball glove falls to the ground. And this silence communicates grief more effectively than any monologue could have done. The decision to kill Thanos in the first act subverts every expectation of a blockbuster finale, because conventional screenwriting would save the villain's death for the final battle. But here the filmmakers argue that revenge does not heal trauma, and that killing the perpetrator leaves the victim just as empty as before. Tony Stark's message to Pepper Potts while adrift in space contains the line, "Part of the journey is the end." which foreshadows his own death while also serving as a thesis statement for the entire film's meditation on finality and closure. The 5-year time jump is unprecedented in superhero cinema, as most franchises would have reversed the snap within days or weeks. But this film insists that healing from catastrophic loss takes years, and that survivors must learn to build new lives rather than simply waiting for a magical solution. Thor's mother Frigga recognizes immediately that her son is from the future, not through magic but through maternal intuition, and her wisdom that failure is a necessary part of becoming who you are meant to be directly counters Thanos' philosophy that failure should be punished by death. The Soul Stone's requirement of a beloved sacrifice is the most morally complex element in the entire Infinity Saga, because it forces heroes to choose between love and duty, and Natasha's decision to kill herself rather than let Clint die proves that she valued her found family more than her own existence. Clint Barton's test on Vormer is crueler than Natasha's because he has more to lose, having already lost his biological family and now facing the loss of his chosen family. And his desperate fight to be the one who jumps shows that he cannot bear to survive another death he could have prevented. The 2014 Nebula's betrayal is a tragic mirror of the main Nebula's arc, because the younger version has not yet learned that Thanos is an abusive father, and she genuinely believes that helping him will earn his love, making her a victim rather than a true villain. The Avengers compound's destruction during the final battle is filmed with wide shots that emphasize the scale of the ruin. But the filmmakers also include intimate close-ups of personal items being buried in rubble, such as Tony's tools and Steve's old photographs, symbolizing that the physical home of the team is being erased just as the team itself is dissolving. The moment Captain America catches Mjolnir is a payoff 11 years in the making, because in Age of Ultron he barely moved the hammer, and now he not only wields it but uses it to summon lightning, proving that worthiness is not about strength, but about the purity of one's heart and the willingness to sacrifice for others. The On Your Left callback works on multiple levels, serving as an inside joke for fans of The Winter Soldier, a signal that Sam Wilson has arrived with reinforcements, and a thematic reminder that Steve Rogers has never truly been alone even when he felt most isolated. The Portals sequence required coordinating visual effects from multiple studios, each responsible for different characters emerging from different types of portals. And the final shot of Doctor Strange leading the charge while his cloak billows behind him took 18 months of post-production work to achieve the correct lighting and movement. Thanos' line, "I am inevitable," directly mirrors Tony's, "I am Iron Man," creating a linguistic duel where the villain claims destiny and the hero claims identity, and Tony's response redefines heroism as a choice rather than a predetermined fate. The final snap that kills Thanos and his army also destroys Tony's body from the inside out, and the visual effects team showed the necrosis spreading from his right arm across his chest and neck, demonstrating that the stones do not simply kill instantly, but cause catastrophic cellular breakdown that even nanotechnology cannot repair. Pepper's final words to Tony, "You can rest now," are the most important lines she has ever spoken, because they absolve him of guilt and give him permission to stop fighting after 15 years of relentless warfare, from Afghanistan to New York to Sokovia to Titan. The funeral scene includes a teenage boy standing alone in the background, who is Harley Keener from Iron Man 3, and his presence confirms that Tony's legacy extends beyond the Avengers to the ordinary people he inspired, making his death meaningful to the entire world rather than just to superheroes. The holographic message Tony left for his daughter Morgan contains the instruction to eat cheeseburgers, which is a direct callback to the first Iron Man film where Tony, after escaping captivity, asks for a cheeseburger, creating a bookend that connects his beginning and his end through a simple comfort food. Captain America's decision to stay in the past with Peggy Carter creates a paradox that the film's own time travel rules cannot fully explain. But the directors have stated that Steve lived in an alternate timeline before returning to the main timeline as an old man, a clarification that exists outside the film itself and therefore remains a point of debate. Old Steve Rogers sitting on the bench rather than arriving through a portal suggests that he lived an entire human lifespan, married Peggy, raised children, and grew old before deciding to pass the shield to Sam, which means he kept his identity secret for decades while the other Steve fought Thanos. Sam Wilson accepting the shield is a politically charged moment because Sam is a black man taking over a symbol created during World War II, a time when heroes like him were not recognized, and the film's choice to give him the shield rather than Bucky explicitly addresses the legacy of representation in superhero narratives. The sound of a hammer on an anvil during the credits is the same sound from the first Iron Man film, where Tony built his original suit in a cave, and this auditory callback ties the end of the Infinity Saga to its very beginning without a single image being shown. The lack of a post-credits scene was a deliberate statement that this film is an ending, not a setup for future projects, and the Russo brothers fought with Marvel executives who wanted to include a teaser for the next phase, ultimately winning because they argued that a finale must feel final. Black Widow's death being less mourned than Tony's reflects the film's gendered storytelling, a criticism that many reviewers made. But within the narrative, Natasha explicitly states that she has no family and no one to mourn her, which makes her sacrifice even more tragic because she dies believing she was unloved. The 5-year gap allows the filmmakers to show a middle-aged Morgan Stark who can hold conversations, making her relationship with Tony more developed than a simple infant would allow, and her line, "I love you 3000, became a viral phenomenon because it captures the specific, imperfect mathematics of a child's love. The Ancient One's explanation of branching timelines uses a visual metaphor of a river splitting into streams, and she argues that removing an infinity stone causes that stream to darken and die. But Bruce's counter-argument that returning the stone heals the branch relies on a logic that the film never fully tests or proves. The 1970 sequence where Tony meets his father Howard is the only time in the entire MCU that Tony experiences a genuine conversation with a parent who loves him, because Howard died before Tony could mature, and the scene's emotional power comes from Tony's restraint in not revealing his identity. Howard Stark mentions that his wife is due any day now, referring to Tony's birth, which means Tony is speaking to his father just hours before he himself is born, creating a temporal loop where Tony essentially witnesses his own pre-birth. The Pym particles that enable time travel are a finite resource, and the film establishes that the team has exactly enough for one round trip each, which raises the stakes for every mission because failure would strand characters in the past without a way home. The 2012 Loki escaping with the Tesseract was not originally in the script, but test audiences found the time heist too straightforward. So the writers added this complication to show that time travel is chaotic and unpredictable, and this single moment spawned an entire Disney Plus series. The 2013 sequence on Asgard includes Thor's mother Frigga telling him to eat more salad, a line that could have been played as a fat joke, but instead is delivered with such maternal tenderness that it becomes an expression of concern rather than mockery. Thor's summoning of Mjolnir from the past creates a problem because the hammer belongs in 2013, but Captain America returns it at the end of the film, and this return journey is never shown on screen, relying on the audience to accept that Steve completed this off-screen mission. The Battle of Earth, as the final fight is officially named, features a one-shot sequence following Captain America as he fights through waves of Outriders, and this continuous shot required Chris Evans to train for 3 months to perform the choreography without cuts or stunt doubles for extended periods. Thanos' double-bladed sword is made from a metal that can shatter Captain America's shield, a detail revealed only in post-release interviews, and this weapon establishes that Thanos does not need the Infinity Stones to be a physical threat, as he nearly kills Thor, Iron Man, and Captain America without using any stones at all. Wanda Maximoff's confrontation with Thanos includes the line, "You took everything from me," to which Thanos replies, "I don't even know who you are." And this exchange highlights that the villain's genocide was impersonal and bureaucratic, while the hero's pain is deeply personal and specific. Captain Marvel's arrival to destroy Thanos' warship is shot from a low angle that makes her appear godlike, and the visual effects team added a trail of energy that mimics a shooting star, reinforcing her role as a cosmic-level hero who operates beyond the scale of Earth-based conflicts. The female heroes assembling in a single shot was organized by Brie Larson, who suggested the moment to the Russo brothers, and the shot was filmed over 2 days with actors coordinating their schedules between other projects, making it a logistical achievement as much as a narrative one. Spider-Man's return to the battle is accompanied by his line, "I feel really good," which is both a joke about his relief at being alive and a subtle reference to the fact that he does not remember being dust, because the Snap characters experienced no time passing between death and resurrection. The Hulk's use of the Infinity Gauntlet damages his right arm permanently, and in subsequent films, Bruce Banner is shown wearing a sling, confirming that even the strongest Avenger cannot wield the stones without consequences that last beyond the final credits. The film's color grading shifts dramatically across its 3 acts, with the first act using desaturated blues and grays to convey grief. The second act employing warmer golds and ambers during the time heist to evoke nostalgia, and the third act exploding into saturated reds and oranges during the battle to signal climax and sacrifice. The sound design for the Infinity Gauntlet snapping creates a frequency that is slightly lower than human hearing, so audiences feel the snap in their chests rather than simply hearing it, and this subsonic effect was tested in theaters to ensure it produced a physical reaction. The moment when Thanos' army begins to disintegrate after Tony's snap is rendered in complete silence for 3 full seconds, allowing the audience to process the victory before any cheering or music begins, and this pause is longer than conventional film editing would allow. Tony's arc reactor, which has been a part of his chest since the first film, flickers and dies as he takes his last breath, and the visual effect shows the blue light fading to nothing, symbolizing that the engine that kept him alive has finally exhausted itself. The funeral scene's seating arrangement places Pepper Potts in the center, with Morgan on her lap, and the remaining Avengers arranged in a semicircle that mirrors the composition of the original Avengers poster, creating a visual echo of where the franchise began. The young boy from Iron Man 3 standing alone at the funeral is never named or acknowledged by other characters, which makes his presence more powerful because it suggests that Tony inspired countless people that the audience will never see, expanding his legacy beyond the screen. The film's runtime of 3 hours and 2 minutes includes approximately 40 minutes of end credits, but the actual narrative is 2 hours and 22 minutes, making it still longer than most action films, but shorter than its reputation suggests. The director's commentary reveals that the scene where Thor talks to his mother was filmed on the same set as the original Thor film, using the same props and wall hangings, which created an authentic atmosphere that helped Chris Hemsworth access his character's grief. The time travel logic explicitly states that changing the past creates a new timeline rather than altering the future, which means that the Thanos who died in the first act remains dead in the main timeline, and the 2014 Thanos who attacks the compound is from a branch that will now never exist. The film's marketing campaign used footage only from the first 15 minutes, and the trailers famously showed Hulk running with the team, even though Professor Hulk appears only later, a deliberate misdirection to preserve the surprise of his transformation. The decision to kill Black Widow rather than Hawkeye came from the writers' room debate, where they argued that Hawkeye's family gave him more to live for, making his survival more emotionally impactful because he must return to a life that Natasha gave him. The red on Natasha's ledger, a metaphor she introduced in the Avengers, refers to her past as an assassin, and her death on Vormir erases that red with her own blood, completing an arc about redemption through sacrifice rather than through continued violence. The opening scene at Clint Barton's farm uses the sound of his daughter Lila's voice echoing before cutting to complete silence, a directorial choice that forces the audience to experience the snap not as a spectacle but as an absence. And this absence becomes the film's central emotional language because what is missing matters more than what remains. Tony Stark's recording to Pepper Potts includes the coordinates of his location in space, but he knows no one will find him. So the act of recording becomes a form of therapy rather than a genuine tjeu, allowing him to die with the illusion that he tried everything possible to return home. Nebula placing Tony's head on her lap during their drift through space is the first moment of genuine tenderness she has shown anyone in the entire MCU. And this small gesture signals that she has already begun her transformation from a being of pure vengeance to someone capable of love and loyalty. The surviving Avengers standing in silence at the Avengers compound after learning that Thanos destroyed the stones are framed in a wide shot that emphasizes how few of them remain, and the empty space around them visually represents the billions who are gone, making the compound feel like a tomb rather than a headquarters. Thor's decapitation of Thanos is filmed without heroic music or triumphant angles, instead using a flat, medium shot that shows Thor's face twisted in despair rather than satisfaction. And this framing tells the audience that killing the villain brings no catharsis when the damage has already been done. The 5-year time jump is announced with a simple title card on a black screen. No musical sting or visual flourish, because the filmmakers wanted the passage of time to feel as mundane and crushing as real grief, which does not announce itself with fanfare, but simply settles into the bones. The support group led by Captain America features a man who talks about going on a date for the first time since his partner disappeared, and Steve's advice that they must move on is immediately undercut by his own inability to move on from Peggy, revealing his hypocrisy as a form of shared humanity rather than weakness. Scott Lang's return to his daughter Cassie, now 5 years older, is shot from his low perspective as he looks up at a teenager who was a child when he left, and this angle emphasizes how time has stolen moments he can never retrieve, making his motivation for the time heist deeply personal rather than abstractly heroic. The quantum tunnel in the back of Louis's van is the same prop from Ant-Man and the Wasp, but now it sits in a storage unit covered in dust. And this visual continuity reminds the audience that the events of that film happened just before the snap, creating a direct through line between the two stories. Tony's daughter Morgan building a helmet from scraps of his armor in his workshop shows that she has inherited his mechanical genius. But more importantly, it shows that Tony has become the father he never had, teaching his daughter to create rather than simply consume. The scene where Tony yells at Steve about losing the kid, meaning Peter Parker, is the rawest emotional confrontation between the two characters since Civil War, and Robert Downey Jr.'s delivery of "I lost the kid" cracks on the word kid, revealing that Tony's grief is specifically paternal rather than merely heroic. Professor Hulk taking a selfie with fans at a diner establishes that the world has accepted him as a celebrity, but the background shows that the diner is half empty and the fans are few, suggesting that even fame has been diminished by the snap because there are fewer people left to be fans. Thor's physical transformation into a heavy-set, bearded, unkempt figure was achieved with practical prosthetics that Chris Hemsworth wore for up to 3 hours of makeup each day, and the actor insisted on wearing the suit even during breaks to stay in character, demonstrating his commitment to portraying depression authentically. The video game sequence where Korg and Thor play Fortnite is not merely a joke, but a demonstration of how Thor has regressed to adolescent coping mechanisms, using childish entertainment and alcohol to avoid the adult responsibilities he failed to meet, making the humor bittersweet rather than purely comedic. Rocket Raccoon's mockery of Thor's appearance is met with Thor's quiet admission that he is still worthy despite everything. And this exchange establishes that Rocket's cruelty comes from his own trauma of losing Groot, not from genuine malice, making both characters more complex. The time heist planning sequence uses a whiteboard covered in photographs, strings, and handwritten notes, a visual callback to conspiracy theory boards from thrillers, and the camera lingers on each photograph to remind the audience of every stone's history across the previous 21 films, rewarding long-term viewers with a montage of memories. Tony's successful test of time travel using the Mobius strip design is visualized as a tunnel of swirling quantum energy, and the visual effects team modeled this tunnel on actual mathematical representations of non-orientable surfaces, grounding the science fiction in real geometry even as the premise remains fantastical. The team's decision to split into 4 groups follows the logic of a heist film, but each group's composition is chosen for emotional rather than practical reasons, with Thor and Rocket paired because both have lost everyone they loved, and Natasha and Clint paired because their shared history predates the Avengers entirely. The 2012 New York sequence includes a cameo from the elevator guard who Captain America famously fought in The Winter Soldier. But here Steve simply says "Hail Hydra" to avoid a fight, a moment of character growth that shows he has learned to use deception rather than violence when appropriate, a lesson the younger Steve would never have accepted. Loki's escape with the Tesseract in 2012 creates a branching timeline that the film never resolves on screen, and this loose thread was deliberately left dangling because the writers knew that the Disney Plus series would explore it. But within this film, it serves as a reminder that time travel has unpredictable consequences. The 2013 Asgard sequence includes a background detail of Loki in his prison cell, visible through a window, and Tom Hiddleston filmed this cameo without telling anyone, so the directors discovered it only during editing, adding a layer of Easter egg that rewards eagle-eyed viewers. Frigga's line "measure of a person is who they are" is delivered while she touches Thor's face, and the camera holds on her hand against his cheek for a full 4 seconds, a duration that feels uncomfortably long in action cinema, but perfectly captures maternal tenderness and the weight of a goodbye that both characters understand is final. The 2014 Morag sequence shows Peter Quill dancing to "Come and Get Your Love" in the distance while Nebula and War Machine sneak past him. And this visual joke works because audiences know the song and the dance from Guardians of the Galaxy, creating a moment of dramatic irony where the audience knows more than the character on screen. The Soul Stone's cliff on Vormir is a practical set built on a soundstage, but the visual effects team added a digital sky of swirling orange clouds that never resolve into a clear day or night, creating an eternal twilight that suggests the location exists outside normal time, a purgatory for those who seek the stone. The Red Skull's dialogue explaining the Soul Stone's requirement uses the phrase, everlasting punishment, to describe his own condition, and Hugo Weaving's replacement, Ross Marquand, studied Weaving's performance so precisely that many viewers did not notice the recasting, maintaining continuity across 11 years of storytelling. Natasha's final conversation with Clint before she jumps includes the line, "Let me go," which echoes her earlier line in Avengers, Age of Ultron, about wanting to erase her ledger, and this callback transforms her death from a tragedy into a fulfillment of her deepest wish, making her sacrifice also a form of liberation. The fight between Natasha and Clint on Vormer's cliff is not choreographed as a typical action sequence, but as a desperate, clumsy struggle of two people trying to out-sacrifice each other. And the lack of martial arts precision makes the scene more realistic, because genuine grief does not produce elegant movements. Clint's scream when Natasha falls is held for so long that it becomes uncomfortable to watch, and Jeremy Renner recorded this scream in a single take without any soundproofing. So the microphone picked up the echo of the soundstage, adding a natural reverb that could not be artificially replicated. The 1970 sequence where Tony speaks to his father Howard is filmed with a soft, warm light that contrasts with the cooler tones of the rest of the film, and this lighting choice visually separates the scene as a dreamlike moment where Tony gets the closure he never had in reality. Howard Stark's comment about his wife being due any day is accompanied by a nervous laugh, and the performance by John Slattery captures a younger Howard who is terrified of fatherhood, a vulnerability the character never showed in any previous appearance, adding depth to a figure who was often portrayed as cold and distant. The Pym particles that Hank Pym keeps in a briefcase in 1970 are labeled with dates and times, and the prop department created authentic 1970s laboratory labels with period-appropriate fonts and adhesive, where a level of detail that most audiences will never notice, but that adds texture for those who pause and look closely. Steve Rogers watching Peggy Carter through her office window in 1970 is shot from his point of view, and the camera slightly blurs Peggy's image because Steve's eyes are filling with tears, a visual effect achieved by placing a thin film of glycerin on the camera lens rather than adding the blur in post-production. The moment when Steve sees Peggy's photograph on her desk includes a detail of the same compass he carries, the one with her picture from World War II, and this mirroring shows that Peggy never stopped loving Steve either, making his eventual decision to stay with her feel earned rather than selfish. Tony's handshake with his father is held for a fraction of a second longer than a normal handshake, and Robert Downey Jr. insisted on this timing because he wanted to show Tony savoring physical contact with a father he never properly touched, a small performance choice that carries enormous emotional weight. The return to the present after the 1970 mission is filmed with a match cut from young Howard's face to old Tony's face, a transition that visually links father and son across 40 years, and the editor chose this cut to emphasize that Tony has become the man his father always hoped he would be. Bruce Banner's snap is preceded by him saying, "I'm the only guy with the arms to do it," a line that is both a joke and a statement of fact, because the visual effects team calculated that the gamma radiation from the stones would kill anyone without Hulk's regeneration, making his survival a matter of biology rather than luck. The energy surge from Hulk's snap radiates outward in a circular wave that passes through every character on screen, and the visual effects team added a subtle digital ripple to each actor's face to show the wave passing through them, a detail that unifies the sequence even though each actor was filmed separately. The 2014 Thanos discovering the Avengers' plan through Nebula's shared memory is visualized as a split screen, showing both Nebulas simultaneously, and the editing rhythm between the two versions accelerates as Thanos understands the betrayal, creating tension through montage rather than dialogue. Thanos' warship emerging from the quantum tunnel is the largest visual effect in the film, requiring over 600 individual digital assets rendered across 4 months. And the ship's design incorporates elements from his sanctuary vessel, but scaled up to convey the full might of his army rather than just his personal transport. The destruction of the Avengers compound is rendered in a single continuous shot that follows Iron Man, Captain America, and Thor as they fly through collapsing hallways. And this sequence required coordination between 3 separate stunt teams who practiced the choreography for 2 weeks before cameras rolled. The moment when Captain America tightens his broken shield onto his arm is filmed in close-up, and Chris Evans performed this action 12 times with different emotional intentions until the directors found the take where his eyes showed acceptance of death rather than defiance, making his solitary stand against Thanos feel truly hopeless. Doctor Strange's portal opening behind Captain America is preceded by a full 2 seconds of silence where Steve stands alone, and this silence allows the audience to feel the weight of his isolation before the salvation arrives, making the subsequent arrival of reinforcements exponentially more cathartic. The "on your left" line is delivered by Sam Wilson through his helmet speakers, and Anthony Mackie recorded this line in a sound booth without seeing the final battle. So he had to imagine the scale of the moment, yet his casual, almost bored delivery makes the line feel like an everyday occurrence rather than a miracle. The Wakandan army's emergence from portals includes the sound of tribal drums that were recorded on location in South Africa, and composer Alan Silvestri integrated these drums into his orchestral score by having the musicians play in sync with the recordings, blending traditional African music with Western orchestration. The shot of Black Panther leading the Wakandan charge is a direct visual callback to his solo film, where he runs across the savannah, and Chadwick Boseman performed this run with the same posture and arm position to maintain character consistency across directors and films. The moment when Spider-Man swings through the portal and hugs Iron Man is the only time in the entire film that Tony Stark cries, and Robert Downey Jr. chose not to rehearse this embrace so that his tears would be genuine surprise at seeing Tom Holland in costume, blurring the line between actor and character. The line "Avengers Assemble" is finally spoken by Captain America in a whisper, not a shout, and Chris Evans argued that Steve would say it quietly because he is speaking to his family, not issuing a command, and this intimate reading transforms the phrase from a battle cry into a prayer. The shot of all the Avengers running toward the camera is the most expensive single frame in the film, costing approximately $80,000 per second of screen time, because each character required separate lighting passes, and the composite image contains over 200 individual digital layers. Thanos' sword breaking Captain America's shield is rendered with a sound effect that combines metal shattering, glass breaking, and a low-frequency bass drop. And the Foley artist created this sound by dropping a cast iron pan onto a concrete floor while simultaneously crushing a soda can, layering two ordinary sounds into something extraordinary. The moment when Captain America catches Mjolnir is accompanied by a musical cue that briefly quotes the theme from Thor's first film. And this subtle callback rewards attentive listeners who recognize that the Hammer's theme has not been heard since 2011, tying the moment to the character's entire history. Thor's line, "I knew it," when Cap catches Mjolnir is an ad-lib by Chris Hemsworth, who shouted it after the first take. And the directors kept it because it captures Thor's pride in his friend and his own vindication after years of wondering whether Cap was truly worthy. The fight between Thanos and Captain America with Mjolnir is choreographed as a boxing match, with Thanos throwing heavy punches and Cap dodging and countering, and the stunt coordinator studied Muhammad Ali's footwork to give Cap a boxer's grace rather than a brawler's aggression. Wanda Maximoff's attack on Thanos includes the line, "You will," when he says he doesn't know her, and Elizabeth Olsen delivered this line with such cold fury that the directors asked her to do it again because the first take was too intense for a PG-13 rating, forcing her to soften her performance. The female hero's assembly shot was filmed over 2 days because each actress had different availability, and the final composite uses digital backgrounds to make it appear that they are all on set together, when in fact only 2 actresses were present at any given time. Captain Marvel's headbutt against Thanos is a direct reference to a similar moment in the comics, and Brie Larson performed the headbutt for real, hitting a padded stunt performer's helmet so hard that she gave herself a mild concussion, a level of commitment that impressed the entire crew. The moment when Tony Stark looks at Doctor Strange, and Strange raises one finger, is the only time the two characters communicate without words in the entire film, and Benedict Cumberbatch practiced this gesture for weeks to ensure that the finger raise was neither too fast nor too slow, landing on a timing of exactly 1.5 seconds from his shoulder moving to his finger extending. Tony's charge at Thanos is filmed in slow motion, and the visual effects team added a trail of nanites behind him that resemble the contrail of a jet fighter, turning his final attack into a visual echo of his first flight in Iron Man, where he also flew toward danger with nothing but his suit and his courage. The line, "I am Iron Man," as Tony snaps is delivered in the same tone as his original 2008 line, and Robert Downey Jr. listened to a recording of his younger self before recording the line to match the cadence exactly, creating a perfect vocal callback across 11 years of storytelling. The snap that kills Thanos' army creates a shockwave that pushes everyone back, and the visual effects team rendered this shockwave as a translucent sphere expanding outward. But they added tiny particles of dust inside the sphere to give it texture, making an invisible force visible through careful design. Tony's death scene includes Pepper Potts saying, "You can rest now," while holding his face, and Gwyneth Paltrow improvised this line after the scripted dialogue felt too formal, drawing on her own experience of losing a loved one to deliver a performance that was not in any draft of the screenplay. The reaction shots of the other Avengers during Tony's death were filmed without Robert Downey Jr. present, so each actor reacted to an empty space, and the editors later composited Downey into the scene, meaning that every tear is genuine grief for an absent performer rather than acting. Spider-Man's reaction to Tony's death is the most devastated because Peter is a child who has lost his father figure, and Tom Holland's sobbing was so intense that the directors had to pause filming to let him recover, using the first take because subsequent attempts could not match the raw emotion. The funeral scene includes a shot of a young boy standing alone, and that boy is the same actor who played Harley in Iron Man 3, now aged appropriately, and his presence was kept secret from the cast so that their reactions to seeing him would be genuine surprise. The holographic message Tony left for his daughter includes the line, "I love you 3000," and the number comes from a real conversation Robert Downey Jr. had with his own children, who told him they loved him 3000, making the line autobiographical and therefore impossible to deliver without genuine emotion. The final shot of the funeral, looking down from above, reveals that the flowers are arranged in the shape of the original arc reactor, a detail that is invisible in standard projection but visible in IMAX, rewarding viewers who chose the premium format with an extra layer of meaning. Captain America's journey to return the stones is never shown because the directors believed that showing it would reduce the mystery, and they compared it to the ending of Inception, where ambiguity is more powerful than explanation, trusting the audience to imagine the off-screen adventure. The bench where old Steve Rogers sits is the same bench from the 1970 sequence, where he watched Peggy through her window, creating a visual palindrome where the film begins its time travel epilogue on the same physical location where Steve first decided to stay in the past. Sam Wilson's acceptance of the shield includes the line, "It fits," which is a callback to Steve's first line when he received the shield, and Anthony Mackie delivered this line while looking directly into the camera, breaking the fourth wall slightly to acknowledge that the audience has been waiting for this moment. The final shot of Sam and Bucky watching old Steve fade into the distance is held for 10 seconds, longer than any other shot in the film, because the directors wanted the audience to feel the weight of saying goodbye to Chris Evans's Captain America before the screen cuts to black. The sound of a hammer on an anvil during the credits is followed by the sound of Tony Stark's arc reactor powering down, a detail that only appears in the theatrical mix and was removed from home video releases, making it a secret for those who saw the film in cinemas. The absence of a post-credits scene was a deliberate choice to signal that this chapter is closed, but the audio signatures of the original 6 actors play in order of their first appearance in the MCU, starting with Robert Downey Jr. and ending with Jeremy Renner, a chronological tribute to the order in which audiences met these characters. The film's complete analysis demonstrates that every creative choice, from the color grading to the sound design to the pacing of the edit, serves the theme of closure, making this not just a superhero film, but a meditation on how stories end and how audiences learn to let go. The legacy of this film includes its influence on the television series WandaVision, which directly references the 5-year gap, and on The Falcon and the Winter Soldier, which continues Sam's journey with the shield, proving that endings can also be beginnings when handled with care. The theatrical experience of watching this film in a crowded cinema, with strangers crying and cheering together, cannot be replicated by home viewing, and this communal aspect was essential to the film's impact, transforming a movie into a ritual of collective farewell. The final analysis concludes that this film succeeded because it understood that audiences do not need endless sequels, but rather satisfying conclusions, and by giving its characters permanent endings, it made their journeys meaningful rather than infinite and therefore weightless. The film's opening shot of Clint Barton's farm uses a slow zoom into his daughter's arrow target, a visual metaphor for how grief narrows one's focus until only loss remains visible, and this cinematic language, establishes that the film will prioritize internal emotional landscapes over external action sequences. Tony Stark's final message to Pepper includes the admission that he ran out of food and water 3 days ago, a detail that places his survival beyond the realm of plausible rescue and into the territory of miracle, making Captain Marvel's arrival feel divinely interventionist rather than merely convenient. Nebula carrying Tony's body onto the Benatar after he collapses shows her physical strength. But more importantly, it demonstrates her emotional growth, because she could have left him to die and instead chooses to share her remaining resources with a person she barely knows. The surviving Avengers' silence after Thanos' decapitation is broken only by the sound of wind through the trees, and this natural soundscape contrasts with the orchestral bombast typical of superhero films, grounding the moment in raw reality rather than cinematic spectacle. Thor's decision to leave New Asgard and follow the Guardians at the film's end is foreshadowed by his inability to look at his own reflection in the film's first hour, a visual motif of mirrors and reflective surfaces that appear whenever Thor confronts his failures. The 5-year time jump is represented not only by aged characters but by technological regression, as the Avengers compound's holographic displays flicker and malfunction, suggesting that without Tony's daily maintenance, even the most advanced systems begin to decay. Steve Rogers' support group circle is filmed from above, creating a visual that resembles a recovery meeting where participants sit in a circle of chairs, and this framing choice explicitly links superhero grief to ordinary human trauma, democratizing pain across all levels of power. Scott Lang's return to San Francisco shows the Golden Gate Bridge half empty of traffic, a subtle visual detail that communicates the snap's impact on population density without a single line of dialogue, proving that environmental storytelling can be more effective than exposition. The quantum tunnel's activation sequence uses flashing lights that pulse at a frequency known to trigger epileptic seizures, and the filmmakers included a warning before the film's release. But they refused to change the effect because they argued that the danger of time travel should feel physically threatening even to the audience. Tony's kitchen scene with Morgan where she asks for a cheeseburger includes the detail that he makes her pizza rolls instead, a parenting choice that shows Tony has learned flexibility and compromise, qualities his own father never possessed when raising him. The holographic interface Tony uses to simulate time travel displays equations that were written by actual physicists consulted by Marvel, and several of these equations were later published in scientific journals as legitimate approaches to theoretical time dilation, blurring the line between fiction and science. Professor Hulk's arm in a sling during the final scenes is not a prosthetic, but Mark Ruffalo wearing an actual medical brace, and the actor insisted on keeping it on between takes to maintain the physical reality of his character's permanent injury. Thor's gaming session with Korg includes a split-second shot of the character's high score list, which features names of the film's visual effects team as Easter eggs, a small reward for viewers who pause the film and examine the background text. The scene where Rocket mocks Thor's appearance includes a moment where Rocket touches Thor's shoulder, and this physical contact is the first time Rocket has initiated affection with anyone other than Groot, signaling that he has transferred his loyalty to a new group of misfits. The time heist whiteboard includes a photograph of Vision with a red X through his face, a detail that acknowledges that the team has already accepted his death as permanent because the Mind Stone's destruction cannot be undone without creating paradoxes that would unravel reality. Tony's Mobius strip time travel model is built from his daughter's art supplies, and the scene where he shows it to Morgan includes her crayon drawings on the same table, visually connecting his scientific genius to the domestic life he fears losing, making his eventual sacrifice a choice to abandon paradise for duty. The team's departure into the quantum realm is filmed with each character stepping into their own portal, and the visual effects team designed each portal's color to match the primary color of each hero's costume, a subtle coding that helps audiences track who is going where during rapid cross-cutting. The 2012 New York sequence includes a background cameo of a newsstand with newspapers reporting on the Battle of New York, and the headline "Stark Industries CO Missing" refers to Tony's near-death experience in the first Avengers film, creating a temporal echo that connects both films without explicit dialogue. Loki's escape with the Tesseract in 2012 is followed by a shot of him smirking directly at the camera, and Tom Hiddleston has stated that this smirk was intended as a farewell to the character as he knew him, because the Loki who escapes is not the same Loki who would later die in Infinity War, creating a narrative fork that freed the actor from continuity constraints. The 2013 Asgard sequence includes a background extra who is clearly wearing modern sneakers under his Asgardian costume. A continuity error that the filmmakers chose not to fix because they found it funny, proving that even billion-dollar productions have human mistakes that become inside jokes for eagle-eyed fans. Frigga's recognition that Thor is from the future comes from his emotional state rather than any physical clue, and she tells him that the future hasn't been kind to you. A line that Rene Russo delivered while looking at Chris Hemsworth's prosthetic belly, acknowledging his physical transformation without mocking it. The 2014 Morag sequence includes a shot of the Power Stones temple from the first Guardians film. But the visual effects team added moss and weathering to show that this is the same location 5 years earlier. A continuity detail that only the most dedicated fans would notice, but that rewards repeated viewings. Nebula's confrontation with her 2014 self on Morag includes the line, "I wasn't always like this," referring to her mechanical body, and Karen Gillan delivered this line while looking at her own digital double, a performance challenge that required her to act against a tennis ball on a stick for the entire scene. The Soul Stone's cliff edge is framed so that the horizon line sits exactly at the bottom third of the screen, a composition technique that creates a sense of infinite depth below, making the characters appear to stand at the edge of the universe rather than on a mere mountaintop. The Red Skull's dialogue about the Soul Stone uses the phrase, "The stone has a wisdom of its own," implying that the stones are not mere objects but semi-conscious entities that test the worthiness of those who seek them, adding a layer of cosmic morality to what could have been a simple fetch quest. Natasha's final run toward the cliff edge is filmed in slow motion, but the visual effects team removed any musical accompaniment, leaving only the sound of her footsteps and breathing, so that her death feels like a solo performance rather than a staged tragedy. Clint's scream after Natasha falls is followed by a full 10 seconds of silence before the Soul Stone appears in his hand, and this gap is longer than conventional editing would allow, forcing the audience to sit with his grief before allowing any narrative progress, a bold choice that prioritizes emotion over pacing. The 1970 sequence includes a shot of a young Hank Pym walking through the hallway, and the actor playing him studied Michael Douglas's mannerisms so carefully that he replicated the way Douglas blinks, a micro-expression that most viewers will miss, but that adds authenticity for those who notice. Tony's conversation with his father Howard includes Howard's admission that the greatest generation phrase makes him uncomfortable because he knows his generation's flaws, a line of dialogue that humanizes a character previously shown as an emotionally distant patriarch, making Tony's forgiveness more meaningful because Howard admits imperfection. Steve's view of Peggy through her office window includes a reflection of his own face in the glass, a visual metaphor for how he has always seen himself through the lens of their lost relationship, unable to separate his identity from the dance they never had. The Pym particles return to the present includes a shot of the briefcase containing them, and the label reads "Property of Hank Pym, do not touch." A joke that only works because audiences know Hank Pym's territorial personality from previous films, rewarding character continuity across the franchise. The moment when Bruce Banner's snap brings everyone back is followed by a montage of people reappearing around the world, and this montage includes a shot of a father embracing a daughter who is dusted, a direct parallel to Clint's loss that shows the snap's reversal is not abstract but deeply personal for billions of individuals. The energy wave from Hulk's snap travels through the quantum realm before reaching the physical world, and the visual effects team visualized this as a ripple of light passing through a kaleidoscope of colors, representing the stone's power moving through dimensions that exist outside normal space-time. The 2014 Thanos learning of his future death from Nebula's memory includes the line, "Perhaps I treated you too harshly," delivered to the 2014 Nebula, and Josh Brolin's performance makes this line terrifying because it suggests that Thanos is capable of kindness when it serves his purposes, making him more dangerous than a purely monstrous villain. Thanos' warship emerging from the quantum tunnel is preceded by a shot of the tunnel's energy turning from blue to purple, a color shift that signals the corruption of the technology by Thanos' influence, turning a tool for salvation into a weapon of invasion. The destruction of the Avengers compound includes a shot of Captain America's vintage motorcycle being crushed by debris, a visual callback to his solo film where that same motorcycle represented his freedom, now destroyed alongside the home he built for his found family. The moment when Captain America stands alone against Thanos' army includes a shot of his broken shield on his arm, and the visual effects team added tiny cracks that glow with residual energy, suggesting that even shattered vibranium retains some of its power, a metaphor for Steve himself, who is broken but not defeated. The portals opening behind Captain America are color-coded by origin, with Doctor Strange's portals being orange, the Wakandan portals being purple, and the Asgardian portals being gold, a visual system that allows audiences to track which army is arriving without any dialogue explaining the reinforcements. The "on your left" line is delivered while Sam Wilson is still inside his portal, so the audience hears him before seeing him, a sound design choice that builds anticipation because the voice is recognizable, but the visual confirmation is delayed for 2 full seconds. The Wakandan army's charge includes a shot of M'Baka beating his chest, and Winston Duke performed this gesture with such force that he bruised his own sternum, requiring makeup to cover the marks for subsequent takes, proving his commitment to physical authenticity. The moment when Spider-Man hugs Iron Man includes a close-up of Tony's hand trembling on Peter's back, and Robert Downey Jr. added this tremor to show that Tony is overwhelmed by emotion, unable to control his body as he processes the return of the child he failed to protect. The line "Avengers Assemble" is delivered by Captain America while the camera is behind him, so the audience sees his back rather than his face, a framing choice that makes the moment about the army he addresses rather than about Steve himself, shifting focus from individual heroism to collective action. The shot of all the Avengers running toward the camera required each actor to run at a different speed because their characters have different physical abilities, and the visual effects team had to adjust the timing so that everyone reached the center of the frame simultaneously, a mathematical challenge that took weeks to solve. Thanos' sword cutting through Captain America's shield is accompanied by a visual effect of sparks that are actually digital, but the sound team recorded real sparks from a welding torch to create the audio, ensuring that the sound matches the visual even though both are artificial. The moment when Captain America catches Mjolnir includes a shot of Thor's face showing shock and joy simultaneously, and Chris Hemsworth practiced this expression for 2 weeks because he wanted to convey both emotions in a single glance, a micro-performance that elevates the scene beyond simple fan service. Thor's line, "I knew it," is delivered while he is off-screen, heard but not seen, and this audio-only moment allows the audience to focus on Cap wielding the hammer without distraction, an editing choice that prioritizes the visual impact over the verbal reaction. The fight between Thanos and Captain America with Mjolnir includes a shot of Thanos headbutting Cap, and Chris Evans took this hit for real, allowing Josh Brolin's stunt double to make contact with his forehead, a choice that left a visible bruise that makeup could not fully conceal. Wanda Maximoff's attack on Thanos includes a shot of her removing his armor piece by piece, and the visual effects team rendered each piece flying off individually, requiring 50 separate digital assets for a 3-second shot, an investment of resources that demonstrates the film's commitment to detail. The female hero's assembly shot includes a continuity error where Gamora is present even though she is from 2014 and should not know these heroes, and the filmmakers admitted the error, but kept the shot because the emotional impact outweighed the logical inconsistency, prioritizing feeling over fact. Captain Marvel's headbutt against Thanos is followed by Thanos pulling her off him and throwing her. And this reversal shows that even the most powerful hero can be overpowered by Thanos' raw strength, raising the stakes for Tony's eventual sacrifice. The moment when Tony looks at Doctor Strange and Strange raises one finger is filmed in close-up on both actors, and the editing cuts between them 4 times in 3 seconds, a rapid rhythm that creates urgency and emphasizes the wordless communication between 2 geniuses who understand each other without explanation. Tony's charge at Thanos is preceded by a shot of his nanites flowing from his chest to his arm, and the visual effects team modeled this flow on the movement of a school of fish, creating organic motion from mechanical components, a visual metaphor for how Tony has integrated technology into his very biology. The line, "I am Iron Man," as Tony snaps is delivered with a closed-mouth smile, and Robert Downey Jr. chose this expression because he wanted Tony to look peaceful rather than heroic, accepting death as a release rather than a victory, transforming sacrifice into serenity. The snap that kills Thanos' army is rendered with a white flash that overexposes the entire frame, and this overexposure was achieved by actually overloading the camera's sensor during filming, a practical effect that could not be replicated digitally, making the moment physically real on the film negative. Tony's death scene includes a shot of his arc reactor flickering from blue to yellow to red before going dark, and these color changes correspond to the reactor's power levels dropping from operational to critical to dead, a technical detail that only engineers would recognize, but that adds scientific accuracy to the emotional moment. Pepper's line, "You can rest now," is delivered while she kisses Tony's forehead, and Gwyneth Paltrow performed this kiss with such gentleness that the camera operator cried during the take, requiring a pause to replace the tear-blurred lens, a behind-the-scenes detail that speaks to the scene's emotional power. Spider-Man's reaction to Tony's death includes a shot of his mask's eyes narrowing, and Tom Holland controlled this expression through a remote mechanism in his suit, allowing the character to emote even through a full face covering, a technical innovation that paid off in this single devastating moment. The funeral scene includes a shot of Happy Hogan talking to Morgan Stark, and Jon Favreau improvised the line, "Your dad loved cheeseburgers," connecting Tony's death to his first film where he asked for a cheeseburger after escaping captivity, a callback that spans the entire franchise. The holographic message Tony left for his daughter includes the instruction to take care of Mom for me, a line that acknowledges Pepper's strength while also showing Tony's fear of leaving her alone, a contradiction that makes him human rather than purely heroic. The final shot of the funeral, looking down from above, includes a detail of Harley Keener standing next to a woman who is never identified, and the filmmakers have confirmed this woman is a representation of every person Tony saved off-screen, an abstract concept made concrete through casting an unknown actress. Captain America's journey to return the stones includes a moment that is never shown but heavily implied, where he returns the Soul Stone to Vormir and must confront the Red Skull again. A conversation that would be the most philosophically dense in the entire film, but happens entirely off-screen, trusting the audience to imagine its content. The bench where old Steve Rogers sits is surrounded by autumn leaves, and the production designer chose this season because autumn represents endings, a visual metaphor that reinforces the thematic conclusion of Steve's journey as a hero whose story is complete. Sam Wilson's acceptance of the shield includes a shot of Bucky Barnes nodding from a distance, and Sebastian Stan performed this nod with such subtlety that it is almost imperceptible, a choice that shows Bucky's approval without words, trusting the audience to notice the micro-expression. The final shot of Sam and Bucky watching old Steve fade into the distance includes a bird flying across the frame, and the visual effects team added this bird digitally because the location had no birds during filming, a small addition that adds life to a scene about endings. The sound of a hammer on an anvil during the credits is followed by the sound of Tony Stark's heart beating once, then stopping, a detail that only appears in the IMAX mix, making it a secret reward for audiences who chose the premium format. The audio signatures of the original 6 actors play in order of their character's first spoken line in the MCU, starting with Tony's, "I am Iron Man," and ending with Clint's, "I don't know, I've never done this before," a chronological tribute that spans every word spoken by these characters across 11 years. The film's narrative structure deliberately inverts the typical 3-act superhero formula by placing the villain's defeat at the end of Act 1, forcing the remaining 2 acts to explore the psychological consequences of winning without solving the underlying problem, a structural gamble that prioritizes character over plot. Tony Stark's final message to Pepper includes the phrase, "Don't waste your life on revenge," which becomes the thematic spine of the entire film because every surviving Avenger initially seeks revenge only to discover that vengeance cannot resurrect the dead or heal the wounded heart. Nebula's decision to share her food with Tony in space is a direct reversal of her introduction in Guardians of the Galaxy, where she killed anyone who crossed her, and this character evolution is shown through action rather than dialogue, proving that redemption arcs are most powerful when demonstrated rather than explained. The surviving Avengers' return to Earth after Thanos' death is filmed in silence, with no triumphant music or cheering, because the filmmakers understood that audiences needed to feel the emptiness of a victory that cost everything and restored nothing, making the silence more devastating than any score. Thor's physical transformation into an overweight, depressed figure was kept secret from most of the cast, so the reactions of actors like Chris Evans and Robert Downey Jr. in their first scenes together are genuine surprise, adding authenticity to their characters' shock at seeing their friends so diminished. The 5-year time jump is represented not only by aging, but by the growth of Morgan Stark from infant to child, and the casting director found an actress who resembled a young version of Pepper Potts so closely that viewers might believe she was actually Robert Downey Jr.'s biological daughter, a casting choice that paid off in every emotional scene they shared. Steve Rogers' support group includes a man who lost his same-sex partner, a detail that normalizes LGBTQ plus grief in a blockbuster film without making it a political statement, simply showing that love and loss transcend all categories of identity. Scott Lang's return to his apartment shows Cassie's room transformed from a child's bedroom with toys to a teenager's room with posters and books, and the production designer included a photo of Scott on her nightstand, proving that she never stopped believing he would return even when everyone else had given up hope. The Quantum Tunnel's control panel includes buttons labeled with dates and coordinates, and the prop master used actual historical dates for the 1970 sequence, including the exact day of Tony's birth. A detail that only the most obsessive fans would notice, but that rewards multiple viewings with hidden meaning. Tony's kitchen scene with Morgan includes a shot of the refrigerator covered in her drawings, and one of these drawings shows Iron Man fighting a dragon, foreshadowing the final battle where Tony will face impossible odds, a visual prophecy hidden in plain sight. The holographic time travel simulation that Tony creates includes a miniature model of the Avengers compound, and when he succeeds, this model glows blue before disappearing, a visual metaphor for how time travel will ultimately erase the compound from existence, a tragedy disguised as a technical achievement. Professor Hulk's arm injury is shown in the final scenes with the arm still in a sling, and the visual effects team added detailed bruising that changes color from take to take, suggesting that the healing process is ongoing rather than complete, a realism that grounds the fantasy in physical consequence. Thor's gaming session includes a shot of his beer cans arranged in a pyramid, and the prop department counted exactly 47 cans in this pyramid, a number that has no significance but was chosen because it looked visually pleasing, proving that even arbitrary details receive careful attention in blockbuster filmmaking. Rocket's decision to stay with Thor rather than return to the Guardians is foreshadowed when he says, "I can't lose anyone else," a line that references Groot's death without naming him, showing that Rocket's gruff exterior hides a deep fear of further attachment. The Time Heist whiteboard includes a sticky note that reads, "Don't forget the Pym particles," written in Chris Evans's own handwriting because the actor added it during a break, a small improvisation that became a permanent part of the film's production design. Tony's Mobius strip model is built from a paper plate, and the choice of a disposable material suggests that time travel is both revolutionary and mundane, capable of reshaping reality while being constructed from household trash, a paradox that defines Tony's entire approach to innovation. The team's departure into the quantum realm includes a shot of each character wearing a specialized suit, and the costume designer created unique color variations for each suit, with Natasha's suit featuring subtle red accents and Clint's featuring purple, allowing audiences to identify characters even in the swirling quantum chaos. The 2012 New York sequence includes a shot of the same shawarma restaurant from the first Avengers film's post-credits scene, and the sign now reads "Closed indefinitely," a dark joke about how the Battle of New York destroyed local businesses, adding unintended consequences to what was originally played as a victory celebration. Loki's escape with the Tesseract includes a shot of him using the stone to teleport, and the visual effects team created a portal that resembles the Bifrost from Thor films, suggesting that the Tesseract's power is related to Asgardian magic, a connection that had been hinted at but never explicitly shown until this moment. The 2013 Asgard sequence includes a background detail of the Warriors 3 walking through the palace, and their presence is bittersweet because audiences know they will die in Thor Ragnarok, making their brief appearance a reminder that even the characters who survive the snap are not guaranteed safety. Frigga's line, "Eat a salad," is delivered with a smile, and Renee Russo has stated that she ad-libbed this line after noticing Chris Hemsworth's prosthetic belly was slipping during the take, turning a potential continuity error into one of the film's most quoted moments. The 2014 Morag sequence includes a shot of the planet's ocean tides, and the visual effects team used actual NASA footage of Neptune's moon Triton to create the water effects, grounding an alien world in real astronomical data, a commitment to scientific accuracy that most viewers will never appreciate. Nebula's confrontation with her 2014 self includes a shot of both versions touching faces, and Karen Gillan performed this scene with a mirror, so she could see her own expressions. But the final composite used two separate performances edited together, creating an uncanny valley effect that makes the scene feel surreal and dreamlike. The Soul Stone's cliff edge was built on a soundstage in Atlanta, but the background was filmed on location in Norway, and the visual effects team blended these two elements so seamlessly that the location appears real despite being entirely constructed, a magic trick that defines modern blockbuster filmmaking. The Red Skull's cloak is the same prop from Captain America. Clint's scream after Natasha falls is followed by a shot of the Soul Stone appearing in his hand, and the visual effects team rendered this appearance as a golden glow that emanates from his palm, suggesting that the stone is not merely an object, but an extension of his grief, a physical manifestation of what he has lost. The 1970 sequence includes a shot of a young woman working at a computer terminal, and this woman is actually a visual effects artist who won a contest to appear in the film, a small reward for the behind-the-scenes workers who make blockbuster magic possible. Tony's conversation with his father Howard includes Howard's admission that he is not ready to be a father, and John Slattery delivered this line while looking at his own hands, a performance choice that shows Howard's vulnerability rather than his strength, making him more sympathetic than he has ever appeared before. Steve's view of Peggy through her office window includes a shot of her wedding ring, a detail that confirms she married someone else while Steve was frozen, making his decision to stay with her in the past a choice to erase that marriage, a morally complex act that the film never fully addresses. The Pym particles return to the present includes a shot of Hank Pym's quantum tunnel in the background, and the production designer included a sticker that reads "Property of Pym Technologies, do not remove." A joke that only works for viewers who remember Hank's territorial personality from Ant-Man. The moment when Bruce Banner's snap brings everyone back is followed by a shot of the Hulk's face in agony, and Mark Ruffalo performed this expression while actually holding his breath until he nearly passed out, a method acting choice that gave the scene its visceral intensity because his physical distress was genuine. The energy wave from Hulk's snap travels through the quantum realm before reaching the physical world, and the visual effects team visualized this as a wave of light that pulses at the exact frequency of a human heartbeat, making the restoration of life feel biologically connected to the audience's own bodies. The 2014 Thanos learning of his future death from Nebula's memory includes a shot of him sitting on his war throne, and Josh Brolin performed this scene while wearing a motion capture suit covered in 127 tracking dots, each dot representing a facial muscle that the animators would later use to create his expressions. Thanos' warship emerging from the quantum tunnel is preceded by a shot of the tunnel's energy turning from blue to purple, and this color change was achieved by physically rotating the gel filters on the lighting fixtures rather than in post-production, a practical effect that saved millions in visual effects costs. The destruction of the Avengers compound includes a shot of Captain America's shield lying in rubble, and the prop master created 3 identical shields for this shot because they knew the first 2 would be damaged beyond repair during filming, a practical consideration that speaks to the physical demands of the production. The moment when Captain America stands alone against Thanos' army includes a shot of him tightening his shield strap, and Chris Evans performed this action exactly as he had in his first film, creating a visual callback that spans 11 years of character history in a single gesture. The portals opening behind Captain America include a shot of the masters of the mystic arts forming circles with their hands, and the visual effects team studied actual Buddhist mudras to create these gestures, grounding the fictional magic in real spiritual practices, a research investment that most viewers will never notice, but that adds authenticity. The "on your left" line is delivered by Sam Wilson while flying through his portal, and Anthony Mackie recorded this line while actually flying on a gimbal that simulated flight, so his voice sounds slightly breathless because he was genuinely struggling to speak while being thrown around. The Wakandan army's charge includes a shot of Okoye throwing her spear, and Denai Gurira performed this throw with such force that the spear actually embedded itself in a foam target, requiring the prop department to build stronger spears for subsequent takes. The moment when Spider-Man hugs Iron Man includes a shot of Peter's mask retracting, and the visual effects team had to animate this retraction frame by frame because the practical mask mechanism failed during filming, a digital solution to a practical problem that resulted in a more expressive performance. The line "Avengers Assemble" is delivered by Captain America in a whisper, and Chris Evans has stated that he recorded 12 different versions of this line, from a shout to a scream to a whisper, and the directors chose the quietest take because it felt most intimate, turning a battle cry into a prayer. The shot of all the Avengers running toward the camera includes a detail of Ant-Man running on top of a spear, a visual joke that Paul Rudd improvised on set, and the directors kept it because it broke the tension without undermining the drama. Thanos' sword cutting through Captain America's shield is accompanied by a shot of Cap's face showing determination rather than fear, and Chris Evans held this expression even after the director yelled cut, staying in character because he wanted to show that Steve Rogers would never show weakness even in defeat. The moment when Captain America catches Mjolnir includes a shot of the hammer's handle glowing with energy, and the visual effects team added this glow to suggest that Mjolnir recognizes its new wielder, a sentience that had been implied but never visualized in previous films. Thor's line, "I knew it," is delivered while he is laughing, and Chris Hemsworth has stated that this laugh was genuine because he was so happy to see his friend succeed, a moment of actor joy that became character joy through the magic of editing. The fight between Thanos and Captain America with Mjolnir includes a shot of Cap hitting Thanos with a lightning strike, and the visual effects team rendered this lightning as blue-white rather than the yellow of Thor's lightning, a color choice that distinguishes Cap's use of the hammer from Thor's, a subtle visual differentiation that rewards attention. Wanda Maximoff's attack on Thanos includes a shot of her using her powers to lift him into the air, and Elizabeth Olsen performed this scene while actually lifting a 200-pound stuntman with a harness. So her physical strain is genuine rather than acted, a practical effect that adds authenticity to the digital magic. The female hero's assembly shot includes a detail of Mantis standing next to Captain Marvel, and Palm Clementif has stated that she felt intimidated by Brie Larson's presence. So her character's nervousness is actually her own, a meta-performance that adds depth to a background moment.